Welcome to another video. Now it's White's turn to move, and White thought it was a good idea to bring the bishop down and take that pawn, because White was thinking, hey, I'm going to take that pawn, he's going to take me, and then the king will be exposed, and I've destroyed his pawn structure. It's going to be great. But let's see what happens. So the bishop takes the pawn, and the computer says the best response is for black to recapture. Okay, but now look what happened. White has just traded a bishop for a pawn. But what's the next move for White? What are they going to do? All of their pieces are way down here. And the major pieces, like the queen and the rooks, they're on this back rank here. So it's not really a good idea to throw your bishop up there, trade it just for a pawn when you don't have a plan set up for thinking about how they're going to respond, what you're going to do. Ideally, you want to have three pieces way up there. You want to have some pieces up on this, at least on this, fifth rank here. You want to have some pieces. And to do a checkmate properly, you really want to have the major pieces like the queen or the rooks involved. And so you need several pieces up there close to the king or attacking that area. Like you could have two bishops and a queen, or you could have a king and two bishops. But you want to have more than just what White did here, which was take a pawn, lose your bishop, and then now you've got nothing. Okay, so let's look at the next example. Okay, now in the next example, White was a little smarter, and he's got the queen for backup here. So he's thinking, okay, now if I take, and the pawn takes my bishop, then the queen can recapture, and at least I've lost my bishop for two pawns. So let's see how that goes. Takes the pawn, pawn takes, queen takes. Now White does have a couple of knights here. As you can see, they're circled in green. But they're not quite up there. If they were closer, say here or here or here or here, that would be better. So it's better than the last example. At least the bishop was traded for two pawns. But White still doesn't have, any rooks involved up there. It's just the queen kind of by herself. But like I said, it is better than the first example because at least you do have some knights. And we can try to see what would the computer say from here. Let's see what happens. Computer is saying knight here. This knight can go here. Bishop here. See, there's a lot of moving has to go on now. Now, once the king gets out of the way, this rook can come over and start threatening this area. Let's see what now. The rook's going over here. So look at all these pieces being moved. So this was not a great plan for White. It was better than the first example, but you really want to have a great plan so that when you go for that attack, you want those moves to be, the replies have to be forced. I mean, you really want to set up a good, solid, you want your opponent to feel like he can't breathe and he's slowly being squeezed, is slowly being crushed. It's not fun, but that's kind of what you want. You want them to progressively feel that they are more and more hindered by your presence. Okay, so look, now they're saying this. I mean, this is still taking a long time, and so White does not have a quick check here, checkmate. So let's go to another example. All right, so again, now the queen is supporting the bishop here. The bishop's eyeballing this. But in this example also, White has these knights that are a little bit further up. Let's see if that makes a difference. Maybe this is the third example, and maybe this one's one in which white has shown even more thought before they go for the kill. So the bishop takes the pawn, and the computer didn't even say that that pawn should have taken the bishop. It said what you just saw, which is this pawn moving here. Now the computer says for the bishop to take. Now the king can't take the bishop because this knight is protecting it. So it's good that white had that set up. Okay, so the king moves there. Queen comes down. See, now you've got some pieces. Look, you got a queen, got a bishop, you got knight here, knight here. So this time white did much better in the plan. It's good to have a plan. So king moves there. Bishop takes the pawn. Knight takes the bishop. But as soon as you capture that knight, you're up another pawn. Okay, rook comes down, tries to intimidate the queen. The knight blocks the rook's attack on the queen, revealing a hidden check from the queen. King has to move. Where's he going to go? He goes there. Queen says check. King goes here. Now queen's got the rook. Black queen blocks. White queen goes for more material. I mean, look at this. Now black only has a queen and a rook, and white has 2 rooks, 2 knights, and a queen. So white could be thinking about trading off these queens, or maybe going in for the checkmate. Let's see what happens. Black moves a pawn up. Computer's saying white should take that pawn. No, it goes that way. Black moves a pawn up. Knight goes down there. Okay, now does queen go there? Okay, so now white is offering the trade of queens. Black takes it. White recaptures. Now look at this. All black has is a rook and 4 pawns. And white has 2 rooks, 2 knights, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. All of their pawns. So this third example was a better example of having more of your pieces set up in a position so that when you're ready to break through and attack and go for the checkmate, you want to make sure you've got plenty of pieces up there, and you want to think about what your opponent, how your opponent might react to it. And so in this third example, white was much better prepared. So the lesson on this one is, don't just waste your bishop like in that first example. Let's look at that one, where the bishop came down, takes the pawn because he's trying to break up the pawn structure. Black pawn recaptures. White traded their bishop for just 1 pawn, and white didn't have any other really pieces anywhere nearby for a follow-up plan. And then in the second and third example, white had increasingly a better plan. So that's what you want to do. Have more of your pieces up there so that when you do go for the attack, it's going to come with a punch. So I'm going to show you some examples. These are all going to be mate in 4 moves. And it'll demonstrate to you why it's good to have at least 2 pieces, major pieces, when you're going in for the checkmate. In this case, black has the queen and the rook. Let's see how they make it happen. Check. King moves. Check again. King moves. Rook says check. King moves. Checkmate. So the queen and the rook really work well together. Let's look at the next example. Black to move. Black already has a lot of pieces aiming in this general direction. This rook also is covering this whole file here. Let's see what happens. Black comes in, sacrifices the queen. White takes the queen. Black moves the knight in, says check. King moves. Black takes the rook. White blocks. Rook takes. And that's checkmate. Let's look at another example. All right, white to move. Bishop goes check. King can't recapture, so the only move is for the rook to take the bishop. But you see now that rook is not protecting this. So let's see what happens there. Check. Now the king can't move, so the rook has to go back. Oh, there's a bishop. Didn't see him. Bishop can block. Well, the rook can just take that. Okay, now the king's in check again. Now the king can't go anywhere. Rook blocks. Queen comes down. Checkmate. Again, look at these pieces. You know, the rook and the queen, they work so well together. All right, let's go to another example. Again, there's a rook and a queen. It's good to see these. You see how well they coordinate. Queen comes in, takes the pawn. King has to move. King moves. What is the queen going to do? Queen says check. King moves. Queen sacrifice. Knight takes queen. Rook comes down. Checkmate. See, king can't go there, 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 or there, because these pawns and this rook guard all those squares. Wow, that was awesome. Let's look for another example. All right, black to move. Rook sacrifice. King takes. Knight comes in. And you may say, wow, the knight is putting the king in check. Why doesn't one of these rooks just capture the knight? Well, because it's a double check. See the queen? So two pieces. And in a double check, the response is the king has to move. So let's see where the king goes. King goes here. Queen comes down. Check. King moves out of the way. Well, now look at this. Mate in one. Boom. You know, so again, the queen, a major piece, working with this knight and this rook to bring about the checkmate. So you want to have, you know, several pieces in there, or at least two major pieces like a queen and a rook if you're going to go in for the attack. Let's see another example. All right, black to move. Rook says check. You may be asking yourself, well, why doesn't the queen just take that rook? Well, because then black can checkmate. So rook says check, king moves out of the way. Queen comes down, says check. Where can the king go? He moves over. Queen says check. King moves over. Checkmate. Another example of the queen and the rook working together to get the checkmate. Let's see another example. All right, looks like it's going to be white to move. What does white have? White has this queen. White has a bishop over here. So it doesn't look like they've brought up a lot of pieces, but let's see how white's going to do it. Queen comes up, says check. King moves out of the way. Bishop comes in, and with that attack, the king can't go here. He can't go here because of this pawn. So what can he do? Bring the pawn down. Bishop takes pawn, sacrifices the bishop. Pawn takes. White's turn. Takes the pawn. Checkmate. All right. So, well, in that example, it was just a queen and a bishop, but the pawn was really nicely placed there too. So, you know, I just wanted to show you a lot of examples of how, in order to go in for the checkmate, you really want to have, you know, several pieces up there helping and assisting, or else, like in that first example I showed you where the bishop went down and took a pawn trying to make something happen, but it was just a loss of a bishop. And in these examples I showed you, all of these mate and fours, you got to really see how the queen and the rook, or two rooks, or queen and a bishop and a rook can all work together. So you really want to get a lot of your pieces in there before you go in for the attack. All right, well, I think that's enough for that video. Thank you for watching.